Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to read you Chapter 9, Parker Ellis from the Unteachables. Back when Grandpa was alive, he and Grams ran the lunch counter at the bus station. I can still picture the luncheonette sign, which always looked like elect the noun to me. I don't remember much about Grandpa except that he used to tell me it was a $10 word, and I'd be able to read it just fine when I got older. We know how that worked out. He has trouble reading. Grams would stand me up in front of the candy counter, and it seemed like it was a mile high, although that was just because I was small. She'd say, "What it be? What will it be, kiddo?" And I would pick out whatever I wanted. In those days, I didn't mind being kiddo because she definitely knew my real name. "This handsome fellow is my grandson Parker," she'd announce whenever the regulars came by. You could just tell by the way she boomed it out that she was totally thrilled by the idea. I wonder if she knows that the guy who drives her every morning is the same little kid who used to brag about to her customers. It's not her fault. When Grandpa died, she started forgetting a lot of stuff. But you don't think a grandson, but you think a grandson would be an exception to that, especially a grandson who's supposed to be her favorite person in the whole world. Graham insists that the reason she can't get her act together is she isn't a morning person. This is from a lady who gets up at 4 a.m. So I'll be halfway to the senior center before I look down and notice that her shoes don't match, or that instead of her purse, she brought a half loaf of Wonder Bread. There are those red, yellow, and blue polka dot dots smiling at me, along with the name, which looks like Downer. Today, Mom's driving because Graham has her semi-annual conference with the social worker at the senior center. Mom calls it Meet the Teacher, since I guess it's a lot like parent conferences at school. Speaking of which, she says to me, "How's 8th grade going? I understand you're in a different kind of program this year." I almost reply, "Yeah, the Unteachables," but that wouldn't be a good idea. The minute she got through with Graham's Meet the Teachers, she'd be stalking the middle school looking to meet my teacher. I picture my folks trying to hold a conversation with Ribbit, who never glances up from his crossword puzzle. Dad especially would have no patience for that. Fall and business season on the farm. Our fall is our busiest season on the farm, with so much harvesting still to do. So I tell her, it's going fine, like always. That's probably to protect her, or maybe to protect him. She casts me a doubtful look. Like always might not have been the best choice of words. Mom assigns my report cards. She knows better than anyone what like always probably means. I add, our teacher has a lot of experience. He started out teaching Stegosauruses before moving to the Unteachables. Dinosaurs had no problem being in class with this guy who did crossword puzzles all day. Mom looks like she has more questions, but luckily Grams is waiting outside her building. No mismatched clothes or missing socks or a rubber gasket from the coffee maker on her wrist instead of her medical alert bracelet. She's thrown a little to see me in the passenger seat instead of behind the wheel, so it takes some coaxing to get her into the truck. She has to sit on the hump between Mom and me since the pickup has no back seat. Of all the cars, you picked this one, she asked Mom. You're crazy. It's just for a couple of minutes, my mother promises. Once we pop Parker at school, you'll have plenty of room. I'm Parker, I put in quickly, since Graham is looking around the car in confusion. She beams at me. Hi-yo, kiddo. Want breakfast? No time. We're coming up on the stop. Mom pulls up in front of the school and I get out. She waves. Have fun. Yeah, right. Fun. That's the last word that comes to mind when I think of SCS8. On the other hand, I sit down with Grams and the social worker won't be a party either. I'm probably getting the better deal. As the pickup roars off, I hear a crushing sound. A crush instrument lies in the pavement, the plastic busted by the weight of the truck. It seems there are more of them around every day as we get closer to Spirit Week, and those are just leftovers from last year. The word is that the Principal Vargas just placed this giant order for new ones for 2019. They're going to be bright yellow, our school color, and say "Go, go, go, Golden Eagles" on the side. It doesn't make much sense to me that you can get a detention for chewing gum, but blasting away a horn as loud as an air raid siren is considered school spirit. Instead of being late like most mornings, I got the opposite problem. I'm early. The buses haven't even started arriving yet, and I wander down to room 117, but nobody's there. The kids in SCS 8 dribble in 10 seconds before the late bell, and at that, we're usually ahead of Mr. Kermit. The only signs of life are coming from the room next door, 115. Oh, he's going to go in there. Miss Fountain is in her classroom rearranging the Velcro smiley faces on her job boards. There's already a Hershey Kiss sitting in the middle of each desk. You know what Mr. Kermit gives us every morning? Nothing, if you don't count the dirty looks. She spots me standing in the doorway and she says, "Good morning, Parker. You're early today. Come have a kiss." I stare at her for a long time before I realize she's talking about the candy. Thanks. The chocolate is sweet in my mouth, and when you spend all your time in SCS 8, you almost forget there's another way to live. My eyes find the lizard terrarium. Hey, I say suddenly, Voldemort's back. She beams. Mr. Kermit found him for me. Really? That doesn't sound like the Ribbit I know, the one who wouldn't give anyone the skin off a grape. Suddenly, I experience an almost irresistible desire to drop to the floor and sit cross-legged on the taped circle. I know Miss Fountain's teaching style is too babyish for our age, but circle time that day might have been the most comfortable I've ever felt in middle school. When you're in the circle, nobody's going to ask you to read something that's written in the unbreakable code. Maybe Aldo can come up with any nice things to say, but I'm willing to go with it. If it means no reading, I'll even say nice things about Elaine. A couple of the 7th graders show up, and there's an emotional reunion of Voldemort. I join in for a while, but eventually one of them notices I'm here. "You're not in this class," he comments meaningfully. That's right, I reflect with a sigh. I'm not. I shoulder my backpack and head out the door, even though it's still early. Kiana crouches in the hall outside SCS 8, a look of intense concentration on her face. "What's going on?" I ask. "Shh." She presses a finger to her lips and points inside the classroom. Mr. Kermit is talking, and at first I think he's chewing someone out. His voice is a lot sharper than its usual half-sleepy drone, and then I hear the reply, tiny and very close. It's coming from the intercom, right on the other side of the door. Principal Vargas. "I don't think you'd be happy about this, Zachary," the principal is saying. "It's no secret that the sound of those horns drives you over the edge." "Zachary, Mr. Kermit's name is Zachary." "That's not the point," our teacher replies. "You've already separated my class from everybody else in the building. Maybe you have your reasons for that, but you can't exclude them from the activities for Spirit Week. That's punishing them for something they haven't done yet." "You loathe Spirit Week," Mrs. Vargo's excuses. "We're not talking about me. We're talking about my students. And as happy as I am to ignore the whole thing, I'm their only teacher. Who's going to stick up for them if I don't?" Ooh, he's sticking up for him. Beside me, Kiana pumps a fist and whispers, "Go, Ribbit." "Think of who we're talking about here," the principal insists. "Think of the disruption they're capable of. Now picture them with the horns in their hands." "Let that be my problem," Mr. Kermit says stubbornly. It's not going to be anybody's problem," she insists. "It's a done deal, Zachary. Your kids are out." How can you exclude kids like that? Because you think that they might be bad. Don't people get a redo? A reset button? We hear the click of the office breaks the connection. On the other side of the door, Mr. Kermit mutters something I can't make out. "Did you hear that?" Kiana breathes. "Mr. Kermit cares about us." "I didn't hear anything about caring," I retort. "That was all about those horns, which we're not getting anyway." "Weren't you paying attention? He fought for us." "I can't figure him out," I complain. "He hates those horns. Why would he want us to have them? So we can kill whoever blows one?" She throws her hands up in exasperation. "Don't you see? It's not about the noisemaker. It's about fairness." That doesn't make much sense to me. If life was fair, there would be no such thing as Unteachables in the first place. Chapter 10. Kiana, bad news from Utah. The equipment trailer got struck by lightning, so production on my mom's movie has been shut down for a couple of weeks. "Can I come home with you while you guys are waiting to start up again?" I asked Mom over Skype. "That wouldn't work," she tells me. "What about school? How can we pull you out of Greenwich when you just got started? And then there's re-enroll you once the shooting resumes here. It would be too disruptive." I have to hold myself back from screaming. There's nothing in dispute to disrupt. I don't really go there. Geez Louise never registered me. I'm not even in a real class. Forget it. Mom would be on the phone with Dad in the second flat. Never a pleasant combo. I'd be back in the office fast enough to make my head spin, registering for 8 classes instead of just 1. 8 new teachers to get used to who give real assignments and real homework. No, my life here isn't perfect, but it's designed for a maximum bearableness. Why get complicated? I'm a short timer, just not quite as short as I thought. 2 extra weeks in Greenwich of dad and step monster, of Chansey's sniffles and fevers and rashes and barfs. 2 more weeks in the Parmesan house. 2 more weeks of the Unteachables. Fine, I can handle it. I can do 2 more weeks standing on my head. Speaking of school, Mom goes on, how are you fitting in? I went there, back when it was old Greenwich High. Great, I tell her. I've already gotten picking for a special program. Mom being special? I knew that wouldn't be able to resist the idea of me being exceptional. I plow forward. It's called SCS 8. Really hard to get into. I should know. I'm not even really in it. The teacher is fantastic. He's super hands-off because he wants us to learn to work independently. Mr. Kermit believes... Kermit, she interrupts. You mean from the cheating scandal? Cheating scandal? Mom's brows furrow. It was an awful long time ago, early 90s. I remember I was away at college when it happened, but it must be the same person. Kermit isn't a very common name. I'm intrigued. What did Mr. Kermit do? I don't remember the details, but the whole town was up in arms about it. I'm surprised he's still teaching. It was a horrible black market against him. Wow, Mr. Kermit has a past. The plot thickens. Mom adds, do you want me to call the school and get to the bottom of it? No, I blurt out. I mean, Mr. Kermit's an awesome teacher now, and that's the main thing, right? Who cares what happened in the 90s? But Kiana, it was a cheating scandal. I don't want you mixed up in something like that. Relax, Mom, I assure. I guarantee there isn't any cheating going on in my room. I can say that with total confidence because there isn't anything going on, period. Why would we bother to cheat when Mr. Kermit never even looks at the few papers he gets? Eventually, she agrees to let the subject drop. I end the Skype call. My mind's racing. Suddenly, I've cracked a mystery that's been nagging at me from the very first moment I followed Parker's schedule into room 117. Why would Mr. Kermit want to teach a class like the Unteachables? Answer, he doesn't. He gets a bad class every year because of what happened way back in the 90s. Seems a little crazy that he's still paying for a mistake from so long ago. People need redemption to be forgiven. But if Mom remembers, other people do too. Turns out SCS 8 isn't just a dumping ground for the rejects of the school. The reject teachers wind up there too. So Mr. Kermit is famous. If Mom still remembers what he did way back when, that counts as fame. Okay, it was a bad thing, but so what? On reality TV, the biggest stars are always the jerks. Besides, cheating scandal or not, I can't forget how he spoke up for a class to Mrs. Vargos. And how he fought for Barnstorm's right to stay with the football team. He may not be much of a teacher, but I'm more convinced than ever that he's one of the good guys. I'm almost anxious to get to school the next day, and it isn't just because Chansey is barking the house down with whooping cough. When I get into the room 117, though Mr. Kermit is absent, we have a substitute, Mrs. Landsman. Mr. Kermit's not exactly a young guy, but Mrs. Landsman is really old. Raman does a quick sketch of her rising from the grave as part of a zombie apocalypse. The kid is really talented. The picture makes the rounds of the class by paper airplane. Dawn of the Dead hisses another when the portrait lands on his desk. No talking, she orders. Too late, a nickname is born. She's Dawn of the Dead, Dawn for short. She's grouchy, but we should be used to that by now, our regular teacher being a gold medalist at the Grouch Olympics. It feels different, though. Dawn crabs at us, while Mr. Kermit just crabs because crabbing is his natural state. So when some of it lands on us, we don't take it personally. We just happen to be in the same room. Dawn is yammering about the Battle of Gettysburg when I hear a power hum, low but growing in volume. At first, I'm afraid the school is about to blow up. Then I realize the sound is coming from the desk next to me, Aldo. His face is almost red as his hair, and he devotes all his breath to maintaining the sound. Now the hum is coming from behind me at a slightly different pitch. I risk to glance over my shoulder, and Barnstorm's doing it, a look of unholy glee on his face. Next, the noise drops at least an octave, Elaine buzzing like a bassoon. So they're all... Well, we Californians know how to prank a sub as well as anybody, so I jump right in. Pretty soon, the whole room is vibrating. Alarm, Dawn of the Dead, puts in a call to the custodian. As soon as Mr. Carstairs comes in, we stop humming. It was just happening a second ago, the substitute teacher insists. It sounded like a problem with the wiring. The custodian racks us with a rueful look. It's the kids, ma'am. They're messing with you. They do it to all the subs. Dawn does not like that. I wouldn't either. For A minute there, I'm afraid we're going to have a real zombie apocalypse on our hands. But in the end, what can she do besides yell? She does a whole lot of that. I'm pretty jarring when you're used to Mr. Kermit, who barely speaks at all. We fight back. We do the old drop a textbook trick at least 20 times. Barnstorm drums with his crutches on the floor. Elaine pretends to be asleep, which is odd because Raman still is awake and alert. Matteo speaks to the substitute in a different language and does all his written work in 11 runes. It's right, I said work. Dawn of the Dead is trying to run this like an actual class. Who does she think she is? Take out your math books, she announced. What math books? Barnstorm returns. Surely they're math books. Her frustration is growing. How do you study math? We do worksheets. What worksheets? I don't see any worksheets. There should be lesson plans. Of course there should, if we had a normal teacher. But Dawn of the Dead doesn't know Mr. Kermit. Maybe she thinks we ransacked the class before she arrived and threw out all the notes of how she was supposed to run the day. Whatever the reason, she's getting madder and madder. With no lesson plans to go by, Dawn finds a language arts paragraph in some random book. But then she does choose Parker to read it aloud. So obviously he takes forever to sound out the first word. And because we've been giving her a hard time, she picks now to decide that somebody's yanking your chain when Parker's the only one who isn't. So she sends him to the principal's office. Oh my gosh. 60 seconds later, we hear a pickup truck with a broken muffler start up and peel out of the parking lot. You know, he didn't do that on purpose, I tell Dawn. He has a reading problem, and he's sensitive about it. Miss Fountain comes over and tries to calm everybody down by inviting us over for circle time. Circle time? Dawn is outraged. These students are too old for circle time, and so are yours. Nobody's too old for circle time. I think it's a great thing. Miss Fountain seems to be about to launch into her speech about how no one is too old for positive reinforcement, but then she takes a look at Dawn of the Dead, who actually might be. She beats a nasty retreat to her own class. When the bell finally rings at 3:30, Dawn of the Dead tells we are the most disrespectful class she's ever been in her long teaching career, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. My son went to this school. He is a successful journalist today, and he'd be appalled to see what's become of this place that gave him his education. You students are a new low. I don't think you've ever behaved for Mr. Kermit the way you've behaved today. And as we listen to her sensitive heels clicking down the hall, a strange quiet descends on room 117. Yeah, well, maybe Mr. Kermit isn't a cranky old bag like you, Aldo tosses after her when she's too far away to hear it. The thing is, she's right, Raman musses, brow furrowed. We wouldn't have behaved that way forever. I wonder why. I could have answered that, because even though Mr. Kermit's kind of ignores us, he knows we're his class and he sticks up for us when we need it. He likes us in his way. I've never been able to explain it to others, but I think in our way, we might be starting to like him too. Relationship starting. When Mr. Kermit enters room 117 the next morning, he's greeted by a sight he's never seen before. The seven of us, quiet and attentive, seated at our desk, hands folded, eyes front. Let's face it, there's no way Dawn of the Dead said anything good about us yesterday. This, then, is payback time, and none of us are looking forward to it. You can feel the tension in the air as we wait for our teacher to let us have it. Mr. Kermit sets his newspaper and his coffee down on his desk and looks from face to face. What? Nobody answers. So he turns, handing out the first worksheets of the day. The instant the papers hit the desk, there's a pen in every hand and all heads are down. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the teacher pull up short, frowning. This is another first. The entire class hard at work, no airplanes circling overhead, no talking. He shrugs and returns to a desk, peering down at the crossword puzzle. I turn my attention to the assignment, which is about current events. I think hard about what I've seen lately in the news, on the internet, and in social media. The intercom buzzes to life. Mr. Kermit, comes the voice of the secretary. Principal Vargas is available this morning if you'd like to discuss Mr. Lansom's report on your students from yesterday. You can almost hear the jarring sound of the needle scratching across the vinyl record. We all freeze, staring up at her teacher. If Dawn of the Dead filed a report, you can bet she gave us Z minus. No, Mr. Kermit replies, thank you. That gets our attention. Is Mr. Kermit so detached from reality he doesn't think anything happened yesterday was bad? Or is it that he never read Dawn's report, just like he never reads any of our work? The mood in room 117 lightens a little. Whatever the reason, it looks as if we might be off the hook. It occurs to me that maybe Mr. Kermit never reads our stuff because none of the Unteachables ever hand in anything worth reading. That's an easy fix. There's an essay question on the back of today's worksheet. I made it a point to knock it out of the park. The prompt is about mass transit, subways, buses, and light rail trains. I believe in the kind of thing anyway. I'm from LA, where our transit museums are a joke, and what do we get for it? Traffic jams and pollution. Pretty soon the entire page is full, and I'm only getting started. I approach Mr. Kermit's desk. Ribbit has pushed a puzzle aside. He's examining a memo from the office. I catch the heading, Report of Substitute Teacher, across the top. He notices me and I search his eyes for reaction to what has to be a horrible rundown of her day with a class of unteachable barbarians. Are you really mad at us? I ask in a small voice. He looks like the question never occurred to him. There are two sides to every story, he finally says. He reaches down and slides the report into the trash can. Love him. Is there anything I can do for you? He adds, obviously wishing I'd go away. Can I have more paper? His brow furrows. For what? My essay. I ran out of space. That causes kind of a stir in our class. In SCS 8, students do too little work, never too much. Mr. Kermit backs into his puzzle now. It's almost as he hoping I'd forget I'd asked for and leave him alone. So can I have it? I persist. He looks blank. The paper. Yes, fine. Well, where is it? He gets up from his desk and surveys the room, and it's like he suddenly found himself in a strange and exotic location, a place he's never seen before. He leads me to a storage closet and opens the door, empty except for cobwebs. It turns me completely helpless. Maybe Miss Fountain has extra paper, I suggest. I'm on it. Parker bolts for the door so suddenly that he knocks over his desk and goes flying. He face plants on the floor, springs right back up, and disappears in the hall. The next thing we hear is Miss Fountain's voice from the room. Parker, you're bleeding. He has a driver's license, Barton sneers. The kid can barely walk. Parker's back a few minutes later holding a wad of pink-stained paper towels to a bloody nose. He hands me a bunch of lined paper, also pink-stained. I fill 4 pages before I'm done with my essay, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. I know I'm just a short-timer, but I can let my work habits go totally down the drain while I'm here. I'm going to have to be ready to hit the ground running when I get back to my real school in California. I march up to the front to hand in the paper to Mr. Kermit. He looks at it like I've just presented him with a plate of baby scorpions. It's my essay, I reply to the question he probably won't ask. I can't wait to hear what you think. He accepts the papers, places them in the corner of his desk, and goes back to his crossword. Aren't you going to read it, I press? Of course, he assures me without looking up. 3 days later, the pages are still in the corner of his desk, untouched. Oh, disappointing. Parker's blood spots are turning brown. I feel the relationship growing. Oh, I wonder why he was out. Chapter 11 tomorrow. Barnstorm Anderson. All right, I'll see you later, guys. Bye.